Welcome back to the deep dive. Have you ever considered how a language truly um, comes to be?
It's a fascinating pull-in, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, not just born, but forged, shaped, and transformed over centuries, really reflecting the soul of a people.
Absolutely.
Today, we're embarking on a pretty amazing deep dive into the incredible journey of the Bengali language. We're going to trace its path from, well, really ancient roots, right up to its vibrant modern form.
It's a huge timeline.
It really is.
Yeah.
Our mission, basically, is to explore this timeline, stretching way back, potentially even before the 10th century CE, into the earliest whispers of Indo-Aryan speech,
Right.
all the way to how it developed into the distinct language we hear and read today. We'll uncover its origins, its connections to other languages, how it navigated different historical stages.
And how its unique script and really rich literature emerged.
Exactly. It's a story full of, well, dramatic shifts and some surprising cultural connections.
And what's truly fascinating here, I think, is how language is never static. It's alive, isn't it?
Yeah, like a living entity.
Constantly evolving, much like a river carving new paths through the landscape. So if we look at its linguistic family tree, the earliest ancestor is Old Indo-Aryan, or OIA,
Okay.
which we primarily know through Vedic and classical Sanskrit.
Right, the really old text.
Exactly. This then transitioned into Middle Indo-Aryan, or MIA. This was a period marked by various forms of Prakrit.
Prakrit. So these were like the everyday languages.
That's a good way to put it. Think of Prakrits as the common spoken languages of the time, distinct from the more formal literary Sanskrit.
Gotcha.
A key example is Pali. You might recognize that name from Emperor Ashoka's ancient inscriptions.
Yes, and Buddhist texts.
Precisely, the Theravada Buddhist canon. And bridging these periods were the Upadrasha speeches.
Upadrasha.
Yeah, these were late forms of Prakrit, already undergoing significant structural changes. They acted as, well, direct precursors to the new Indo-Aryan tongues, like modern Bengali, that began to emerge later on.
Okay, so understanding those Middle Indo-Aryan subdivisions seems really crucial for tracing the earliest echoes of what would eventually become Bengali. Can you walk us through some of the big linguistic shifts that happened in those early stages?
Absolutely. Let's look at the early MIA period first. That's roughly from 600 to 200 BC. This gives us some really foundational changes.
Like what specifically?
Well, linguists like Sunidhi Kumar Chatterjee highlighted a general simplification of the sound system.
Simplification.
Yeah. For instance, complex ancient sounds, particularly certain vocalic R and L sounds, they started to disappear.
Okay.
And vowel combinations like I and R began simplifying into clearer R and oak sounds.
So easier to pronounce, maybe.
Probably, yeah. We also saw this tendency to drop final consonants, word endings, and a reduction of the three distinct O's sounds, shik and ease, into just one, usually is or shir.
Interesting. So it sounds like a streamlining process.
Exactly. These weren't just linguistic quirks. They were the first signs of those older Indo-Aryan languages shedding their ancient complexities. It really paved the way for the simpler, maybe more fluid structures that would eventually characterize languages like Bengali.
So streamlining sounds, setting the stage for easier communication. Now, as we move into that transitional MIA period, say 200 BC to 200 AD, what about writing? We hear about two prominent ancient systems, Karohi and Brāhmī. What was their significance, and why did one last while the other just vanished?
That's a really pivotal question. Karuhi, which was written right to left, originating in what's now northern Pakistan, well, it was significant for a time.
Okay.
But here's the crucial turn. Karuhi simply died out. No direct descendants.
Well, really? Just gone.
Pretty much. Brāhmī, however, written left to right, not only survived, but thrived. It became the parent script for most of the Middle Indo-Aryan speeches and writing systems that followed.
So its survival changed everything.
It really did. It's resilience and adaptability that changed everything for future languages, including Bengali.
It's quite remarkable how one script's survival could have such a massive impact. What was it about Brāhmī, then, that gave it such an enduring legacy, especially as we move into the second and late MIA stages?
Well, Brāhmī's adaptability was key. It allowed for a great deal of regional variation, which made it fertile ground for new scripts to develop.
Okay.
So in the second MIA stage, say 200 to 600 AD, We saw the rise of what are sometimes called dramatic Prakrits.
Dramatic Prakrits.
Yeah, these were sort of more refined forms of the spoken languages used in literature and theater. Think Surlasani, Mahara, and Magadhi.
Right.
Then, by the late MIA period, roughly 600 to 1000 AD, Surasani and Up of Russia were dominant. This era brought some really key linguistic shifts.
Such as?
Well, the introduction of rhyme and versification, that was a huge development for poetry.
Oh, definitely.
And we also see the growing use of loan words, terms either borrowed directly or adapted from Sanskrit and earlier Prakrits. This significantly enriched the vocabulary of the emerging languages.
Okay, speaking of Brāhmī, its impact is clear, but how did we even figure out how to read this ancient script? Deciphering it sounds like a massive undertaking.
Oh, it truly was. A heroic effort, really. Like linguistic detective work that unlocked huge swaths of ancient history for us.
So who cracked the code?
The first successful attempts were made around 1836 by a Norwegian scholar, Christian Lassen. He used bilingual Greek Brāhmī coins.
Clever.
Yeah, to correctly identify several letters. But the big breakthrough came with James Prinsep.
Prinsep, right. I've heard the name.
He was an antiquary and a colonial administrator in India. He, along with Alexander Cunningham, really completed the task in 1837-38.
And what did that allow?
Their work allowed us to read the edicts of Emperor Ashoka. Suddenly, we had direct insight into ancient Indian history, politics, philosophy, things previously inaccessible.
Wow. It's like finding a lost key.
Exactly. It was like restoring a lost library. It gave us the very genetic code, if you like, of so many modern South Asian scripts.
So Brāhmī is literally the mother script. That's incredible. How did the Bengali script itself develop from this, well, foundational system?
Precisely. The Bengali script developed directly from what's called the northern class of Brāhmī.
Right.
And it's not just Bengali. Brāhmī is also the ancestor of many modern scripts you'd recognize. Devanagari, Nagari, Sarda, Tamil, Telugu, Marathi, Gujarati.
Really? Tamil and Telugu too?
Yeah.
I wouldn't have guessed they looked related.
It's true the divergence happened over a very long time, but the lineage is there. Brahmi's local development can even be traced back conceptually to the Indus Valley writing system, though that connection is debated. But its presence is famously seen in those Ashokan rock edicts across the subcontinent. It's a remarkable story of continuity.
While this linguistic foundation was being laid, we also need to understand the unique place, the sort of geographical and cultural crucible where Bengali itself would truly take root. Because, as Suniti Kumar Chatterjee observed back in 1926,
In his History of Bengal, yeah.
exactly, he said Bengal originally did not form one country and one nation. You had the Ganges and Brahmaputra rivers basically dividing the region into distinct areas.
Inhabited by various tribes, Putras, Volgas, Rashas, Sumas.
Right. Let's zoom in on that term Volga for a moment. Its earliest appearance is a bit debated, isn't it?
It is. There's a mention in the Aitareya texts, but its exact meaning there is unclear.
That later on.
Oh, later it's quite clear. Banga appears without doubt in the major epics, the Ramayana and Mahabharata. Search parties sent eastward, references and lists of peoples,
Okay.
and it's in numerous later foundational texts as well. Baudrillana's Dharma Sutra, Patanjali's Mahabha, Buddhist texts like the Milinda Panyo and the Sri Lankan Chronicles. It clearly marks out a region.
So how did this fragmented region eventually become Bengal? And crucially, how did an Aryan language come to dominate there, replacing older languages?
Well, this leads us to what scholars call the Aryanization of Bengal. North and West Bengal came under Emperor Ashoka's rule back in the 3rd century BC.
Right, through the Mauryan Empire.
Exactly. And this seems to have marked the beginning of a vigorous movement. Indigenous dialects, things like Kol, various Austric languages, maybe some Dravidian speeches, they were gradually replaced by Aryan speech.
And how did this new language spread?
It was brought from Magadha, the heartland of the Mauryan Empire, and possibly beyond. It came with administrators, soldiers, Buddhist, and Jain missionaries spreading their faiths, and importantly, traders.
So basically, the levers of power, religion, and commerce.
Pretty much. These were the social forces that literally reshaped the linguistic landscape of Bengal, fundamentally transforming how people communicated over centuries.
It's fascinating how language so clearly reflected the social hierarchy back then. You mentioned earlier Sanskrit being the furnished language of aristocrats and literary circles.
Mm-hmm.
While Prakrits are seen as a vulgar, sort of unsophisticated speech of common folk.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that Prakrit itself was initially a somewhat derogatory term coined by Sanskrit speakers. It really highlights how perceived status, whether historical or contemporary, often influences a language's development and its place in society.
That's a really important point. Does it make you think about how we view dialects or accents today?
Absolutely. It raises that question. How much do our own biases affect how we value certain forms of speech even now? It was within this complex social and linguistic mix that the Bengali language and its literature truly began to coalesce, taking shape around the 10th century AD.
Okay.
And the very first literature we can identify as being composed in an old or archaic form of Bengali was the Caryāpada.
Right, the Caryāpada. So this period, say 10th to early 13th centuries, that's the formative or Proto-Bengali stage.
Correct. And the Caryāpada is basically the only representative text we have from that entire era.
Wow, just one text. What is it exactly?
Imagine a collection of 47 songs, they're called karyas or padas, composed over maybe 200 years by about 23 mystic teachers, known as siddhas.
Siddhas.
Yeah, they belong to a specific Buddhist tradition, the Sahajiya sect of Tantrika or late Mahayana Buddhism. Scholars like Suniti Kumar Chatterjee place its composition probably in the early 12th century AD.
And who found this vital text?
It was discovered, edited, and published by Acharya Mahamahopatiyaya Hariprasad Shastri. He famously described its language as, a language of light and shadow, partly clear and partly obscure.
Evocative.
Isn't it? And within it, Louis-Pada is considered the earliest poet, while Caryāpada composed the most verses, 13, I think. Even the famous Atisha Shujana Dipankara, a major Buddhist scholar from Bengal who went to Tibet, is believed to be one of the poets.
Amazing. So what was the language like, and what were they writing about?
The language was Proto-Bengali, definitely, but you can see significant influences from an earlier stage called Saraseni Apatrasha, and also from Sanskrit and literary Prakrits.
A real mix.
Yes. And poetically, it used a specific rhythmic structure, the Matravita meter. It's sort of a precursor to the later, more established Payar form that would become dominant in Bengali poetry.
And the content.
Well, beyond its linguistic importance, it offers this incredibly vivid window into medieval Bengali society occupations, daily life, but all woven through with profound Buddhist doctrines and mystical ideas.
So it's spiritual, but also grounded in reality.
Very much so. And what truly makes the Caryāpada such a landmark is how it establishes, right at the dawn of Bengali literature, this tradition of deep emotional and spiritual inquiry.
How so?
Scholars like Tapan Mohan Chattopadhyay pointed out early elements of lyric poetry in it. For example, there's Ganapada's 10th Karya. It expresses this really unrestrained desire. Human love and mystical transcendence kind of flow into one another.
Interesting.
This earthly union is often used as a metaphor for Mahasukha, or supreme bliss. It shows the language's immediate capacity for really sophisticated artistic and spiritual expression right from the start.
That's incredible. Human love and mysticism intertwined at the very beginning of the literary tradition.
Exactly. Following the Caryāpada, we enter a transitional period, maybe 1200 to 1300 AD, leading into what we call Middle Bengali.
Okay.
During this time, the language really started solidifying its distinct Bengali characteristics. It was evolving from the speech of the Karyas towards what we find in texts like the Śrī-Kṛṣṇa-Kīrttana.
Śrī-Kṛṣṇa-Kīrttana. Tell us about that.
Right, this is another really important text. It was discovered much later in 1909 by Basanta Ranjan Ray and published in 1916. It contains 418 devotional lyrics spread across 13 chapters, celebrating the divine love story of Radha and Kala.
Yeah, a very central theme in later Bengali culture.
Hugely central. Now, it's generally dated to the 15th century, but there's an interesting scholarly debate. Some, like Sukumar Sen, suggested the physical manuscript we have might actually be a much later copy, maybe 18th or 19th century.
Ah, the complexities of manuscript dating.
Always. But moving into the late middle period, say from about 1400 to 1800 AD, this is where we see a genuine flourishing of Bengali literature.
Okay, the pace picks up.
Definitely. We encounter key figures like Maladhar Basu, an early narrative poet whose Śrī-Kṛṣṇa Vidyāsāgar from the late 15th century is renowned.
Right.
This era also gave us the Mangal Kavya. These are poems of benediction celebrating indigenous deities, often blending them with broader Vedic and Hindu traditions. Mukundaram Chakrabarti's Chandimangal from the 16th century is probably the most famous example of this very popular genre.
Blending local and pan-Indian traditions. That sounds typically Bengali.
Very much so. And we also see these monumental retellings of the great epics. Krithvas Osha gave us the first Bangla Ramayana, probably commissioned by the Sultan of Gauda, written in that flowing pyre meter.
The Ramayana in Bengali. That must have been huge.
Immensely influential. And later, Kersham Das contributed his Kajasi Mahabharat, which became an incredibly popular version of the Mahabharata for centuries.
So the epics became truly accessible in the local language.
Exactly. And this period also saw significant external influences starting to creep in.
Like what?
Persian vocabulary due to Mughal rule and administration, and also Portuguese words from traders and missionaries. They start making their way into the language.
Portuguese, really?
Yes, words related to trade, household items, religion. In fact, the first ever printed Bangla grammar and dictionary was compiled by a Portuguese priest, Manuel de Assumpção, way back in 1743.
Wow, 1743, that's early.
It is. And all these dynamic developments, the flourishing literature, the external influences, as Suniti Kumar Chatterjee noted, they basically ushered in, by the end of the 18th century, the modern stage of the language.
It really makes you think, how much do these major historical interactions, the arrival of completely new cultures and languages, how much do they fundamentally reshape a language, pushing it towards its modern form?
Oh, enormously. Language is like a mirror reflecting history, isn't it? The very fabric of Bengali was enriched, changed, stretched by these exchanges. And then came another absolute game changer in the late 18th century.
The printing press.
Exactly.
Right. So between about 1770 and 1800 AD, printing presses were set up in Bengal. There was one in Calcutta by James Augustus Hickey.
Famous for Hickey's Bengal Gazette.
India's first newspaper, yeah. Right. And another press in Hooghly, run by Nathaniel Brassey Halhed and Charles Wilkins. They printed Halhed's A Grammar of the Bengali Language in 1778. That was the first Bengali grammar actually printed in India.
A huge milestone.
And then, of course, the famed Baptist missionary William Carey made significant contributions. He oversaw the translation of the Bengali Bible, published in 1800, and later wrote his own influential A Grammar of the Bengali Language in 1818. That must have been a revolution for the written word.
Absolutely. This era truly marks the beginning of the modern period of Bengali. And it was largely solidified, institutionally speaking, with the founding of Fort William College in Calcutta in 1800.
Fort William College. Why was that so important?
Well, Lord Wellesley, the Governor-General at the time, established the college specifically to train British administrators.
Ah, for the East India Company.
Yeah, precisely. The idea was to school them in native languages, cultures, philosophies, basically everything they needed to know for successful rule. This initiative brought together scholars, both British and Indian pandits.
And they needed materials.
Exactly. This led directly to the creation of numerous textbooks, dictionaries, grammar texts in Bengali and other languages, and crucially, prose writing in Bengali, which had been less prominent than poetry, really began to flourish.
Why prose specifically?
Primarily for administrative and educational purposes initially, they needed practical texts, but this marked a really significant shift in the language's utility and its form.
So the demand for practical texts needed for colonial administration inadvertently sparked a kind of renaissance in Bengali prose. Who are the key figures shaping this new literary landscape?
This era saw some true pioneers emerge. Raja Ramahan Roy stands out.
The great reformer.
Indeed. A remarkable polyglot fluent in Sanskrit, Arabic, Persian, Hindi, Bengali. He apparently observed what he called the corrupt writings of non-Bengali writers attempting Bengali prose.
Protecting the language.
In a way, yes. He, along with other Bengali educationists, contributed significantly to establishing what they considered proper Bengali prose. He translated Upanishads, wrote philosophical tracts like Vedanta Grantha, and even penned his own grammar of the Bengali language.
A massive contribution. Anyone else?
Another key figure was Ramchandra Vidyāsāgar. He was a lexicographer and Sanskrit scholar. His Bangapash Abhidhan from 1817 was the first monolingual Bengali dictionary.
First monolingual one.
Okay. These individuals weren't just writing, they were actively defining the standards for modern Bengali prose.
And then we come to a figure often called the father of Bengali prose, maybe even the father of the modern Bengali language itself. Ishwarchandra Vidyāsāgar. What was his monumental contribution? Why those titles?
Vidyāsāgar was, well, a genuine polymath, a brilliant Sanskrit scholar, a writer, an educationist, a humanist, a major social reformer, philanthropist. The list goes on.
Quite the resume.
Isn't it? But his specific contribution to the language came through his extraordinarily brilliant work, Varna Parichaya, published in 1855.
Varna Parichaya. Introduction to the alphabet.
Exactly. With this book, designed for learners, He essentially standardized the Bengali script. He introduced and codified the 12 vowels and 40 consonants that form the basis of modern standard Bengali orthography.
He literally shaped how Bengali is written today.
Pretty much, yes. He worked at Fort William College and later headed Sanskrit College, so he was in a position of influence. He didn't just contribute to literature, he fundamentally shaped the very tools, the very form of the written language. His impact on literacy and the language's structure is just immense.
That's an incredible legacy. And beyond standardization, this modern period also saw the birth of new forms of public communication, like the daily newspaper and the novel, right?
Precisely. The newspaper, Sambad Prabhakar, founded by Ishwarchandra Gupta, is a key example. It started as a weekly in 1831 and became the first Bengali daily newspaper in 1839.
And it was influential.
Hugely influential. It covered everything: news, politics, social issues, religion, literature. It apparently even played a role in shaping public sentiment during events like the Indigo Revolt.
Wow. And the novel.
While Sambad Prabhakar is also where Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay, another giant of Bengali literature, began his writing career. He later went on to write what's generally considered the first Bengali novel, Rajmohan's Wife, though interestingly, his very first attempt at a novel was in English.
Fascinating. So these developments, the newspaper, the novel, they fundamentally changed how information was shared, how stories were told.
Absolutely. They made the written word accessible and relevant to a much wider audience than ever before, really cementing Bengali as a modern, multifaceted language.
What an absolutely incredible journey we've taken today. Seriously, from those ancient Indo-Aryan roots, the mysterious Brāhmī script, through the mystical lyrics of the Caryāpada, those grand epic retellings, all the way to the revolutionary impact of the printing press and those towering figures like Vidyāsāgar, who literally formalized modern Bengali.
It really is a testament to the language's incredible resilience and adaptability, isn't it?
It really is.
It's just a profound reminder that language isn't some static object in a museum. It's a living entity, constantly adapting, absorbing new influences, being shaped by its people, by history, even by global interactions.
Like a cultural fingerprint.
That's a great way to put it. A cultural fingerprint revealing so much about the human experience across millennia. It shows us how a community's identity is just intrinsically woven into its words.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? As we sit here talking, our languages, English, Bengali, all of them, they're still evolving. Right now.
Constantly absorbing new words, adapting to new technologies, new social norms.
So what shifts and transformations are happening in our own linguistic landscape today that maybe future generations will look back on as pivotal moments?
It's impossible to know for sure, but it's happening.
Maybe your own words, the way you speak and write today, are part of that ongoing evolution, something to think about. Keep listening, keep learning, and keep asking those deep questions.